Transformers Exodus, Chapter 6. The first thing Orion Pax thought about K-On! Was that he had never seen anything like it. Of course, he had seen images, but experiencing the place with all of his sensory arrays at once, getting the totality of the experience, he had come to K-On! In his alt form, rolling down through Kalis and nearly well of Allsparks, source of every living Cybertronian. Then he crossed the Taurus states and entered the Sea of Rust, with the Sonic Canyons to the south. Skirting the canyons, Orion Pax entered the Badlands and watched as the groomed, civilized surface of Cybertron was replaced by rugged, broken territory. Metallic ridges and sinuous canyons filled axle-deep with rust were the norm. In places ancient ruins sprouted from the foundations. Orion Pax knew that the Badlands had been the scene of great deeds and immensely important moments in the history of Cybertron, but he had never gained access to the records that might have told him what those deeds and moments were. So he rolled on, drinking in all of the information he could by observing the environment around him. Once, he imagined, this had been an industrial area but not a wasteland. Now, it was hard to see it as anything but a dead remnant of a civilization irrevocably in decline. That, however, was what Orion Pax was out to change. He and Megatron together could spearhead that change. The city of K-On! Sprawled across a plateau 3 times the surface area of Iacon. Over it hung a perpetual cloud of smoke and heavy metal compounds. Whereas the architecture of Iacon reached up and out, defined by towers and arches, stepping stone ridges of residential blocks and marvels of engineering, K-On! In contrast, was like an endless tumble of blackened rubble, immense mechanical structures collapsing onto one another, and newer generations of the same built upon them. It looked as if it had been bombed from orbit, then pieced back together by blind minicons. In alt form, Orion Pax rumbled through the outskirts of K-On!, returning to protoform when he got toward the center of the city, where the roads became tangled and overhung with conduits, catwalks. It was impossible to keep oriented without satellite and grid interface. You couldn't see in K-On!. There was no way to understand where you were in relation to the rest of the city. In Iacon, you had a sense of space and location. What must have been like to live here from the moment you came out of the Well of Allsparks? Walking now, Orion Pax looked for the building Megatron had described to him. It was to the south of K-On!'s center, and in between 2 slag pits so deep that Orion Pax could not see to the bottom unless he came right to the edge. The building itself was a pyramidal black monument, squared at the top for a landing pad. Inside it, Megatron had said, was an abandoned cyber hydraulic works. It was the perfect venue for gladiatorial matches, as well as black market production of optics and auditory components. Those degraded fast in the heavily polluted atmosphere of K-On!, and especially in the gladiatorial arenas, where injuries to sensory arrays were extremely common in surviving combatants. But it was below those workshops that the real action took place. For nearly half a hick below street level, interconnected subterranean levels of support mechanisms, workers as housings, material storage, and refinery pipelines formed a perfect series of spaces for gladiatorial matches. There were more than a dozen places like it in K-On!, 20 more in Slaughter City, more yet in various outlying settlements in the Badlands and right up to the eastern terminus of the Sonic Canyons. Here, though, was the heart of the gladiator profession. All the fighting Cybertronians from other districts came here to make their names, literally in Megatron's case. And now that Megatron had thrown out the criminal syndicate that had controlled the pits, he was in the process of turning the gladiators into the seeds of an army. Orion Pax approached the pyramid as if it held the secret of a Cybertron he had never known existed. At the side door, 2 Cybertronians, one slightly smaller than Orion Pax, black and white with eyes like red searchlights, and one enormous, 4 or 5 times his mass, and carrying a mace the size of Orion Pax at least, appeared to block his way. "Match entrance is at the other side," the small one said. "You must be Barricade," Orion Pax said. He turned to the big one. "And you're Lugnut, right? Megatron told me you might be out here. I'm here to meet him." "Just strolling through beautiful K-On to meet the boss, are you?" Barricade said. "Funny. He didn't say anything about that to us." "You sure?" Orion Pax glanced at Lugnut, who wasn't speaking. He thought he understood. Lugnut would watch whatever happened until one of his superiors told him to act. The tricks with being like that was to convince them you were one of their superiors, without them ever knowing you were trying to convince them. "Lugnut, he must have told you," Orion Pax said. Lugnut looked surprised that anyone was talking to him. "Could be," he said. "I don't always—" "Shut up!" Barricade snapped. He glared at Orion Pax. "You don't know what the boss said to who?" Orion Pax said, "I know what he said to me." Standoff. Orion Pax could feel the tension. Barricade couldn't stand the idea of being shown up in front of Lugnut. He was that easy to manipulate. Or was he? Was he making this easy to test Orion Pax? K-On was a long, long way from the House of Records in Iacon. "Listen," Orion Pax said. He thought he had already made his point. "I'll stay here with the big guy. You go ask the boss. Easy, right?" "I don't need you to tell me what's easy and what isn't," Barricade said. But he was already moving to go back inside. Perfect. "Lugnut," he added with the door open. "Don't let this mech go anywhere." Mech, thought Orion Pax. He's got to put me in my place. Gladiators wore their emotions on their sleeves, it seemed. He wondered if he should have reacted to the insult, or if a reaction would have been too provocative. Then he started thinking that he was being too deliberative, overthinking everything he did, overanalyzing everything others did. "What else?" Megatron would have said. "What else are you going to do when you've been told for your entire existence that you can't analyze, can't think for yourself, and then you get the chance?" Yes, Orion Pax thought. And on the heels of that thought, another. He might have said it even before Megatron.